Well, here we are with another edition of Real Estate Therapy. And I am so excited because I have someone with me today who's very dear to me. We go way back, even though I was surprised at how far back we go when I was thinking about that yesterday. Anyway, I'm happy to introduce Sherry Richert Belul. And Sherry, why don't you tell us a little bit about you before we dive into this?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to be here with you, Cynthia. This is going to be great. I know we always have very interesting conversations, so thanks for inviting me for this. And so the first thing I always say to people, I have a company called Simply Celebrate, and I just think it's important to tell people that whole world of celebration and appreciation, gratitude and love grew out of a very dark period of anxiety and depression for me. And I know we're not going to talk about that. We don't need to go anywhere with that. But I like to let people know that because a lot of times when people hear about me or they hear about my work, they make some assumptions that I'm one of those naturally happy people. And I'm not. I practice really hard and practice does pay off, right? I have a very joyful life and my work is wonderful and it's all practice.
Right. But, people are, I know I have people who are dear to me who find people who are a little too cheerful annoying. They're actually, it scares them. It
Yeah.
scares them. And, but yeah. And so they want to run away. Um, but yes, simply celebrate is the simply part is really important. But simply, it's like having natural looking makeup. It takes a lot of work. You have to practice. You have to
You know what?
practice, right?
I
or
love that.
or you're really screwed. Um,
I love that. I love that. Yes and no. I also just want to say that a big part, and I think we're going to be talking a little bit about this because it does relate to home and place. A big part of the simply is also my Zen practice. And so we could use this moment as an example, right? Like right now, we could just celebrate how fun it is to giggle a little bit with each other. And to me, that's a celebration, right? Because
yes.
I'm well aware I could be looking at someone right now who's mean or gruff or, no fun, but that's not you. So that's a celebration.
I'm with you on that. I mean, there's so many things if we stop or we don't stop, but we just observe, just see what's like. When I used to be freaked out, I was a very anxious flyer. Anytime I got on an airplane, I was prepared to die, basically. And but I started to learn techniques for um, helping me get through the flight. And it could be something as simple as noticing the texture on the sweater I was wearing,
Yeah.
seeing that and saying, "Well, what a pleasing color of pink this is." And I'm really seeing it. I'm seeing how these threads have come together. And that brings me joy, and that gives me something to celebrate, and it makes me feel grounded and calmer. Just
It does. I
noticing.
love that. I love that. Yep. Because I think that when we're present with something, our attention really can only be on that thing.
Right, right.
But I think this is a whole different conversation than we were planning to have. But is that all right?
Oh, it's fine. I want to go whichever way the wind blows. And right now I wanted to mention your hat. You always wear a hat, almost always. And I actually was thinking about wearing a hat today. Um, then I thought, oh, maybe that'll be too weird. And plus, all I have are baseball caps right now with me. And but I love what you're wearing. Um,
Oh,
for you who are just listening, Sherry has on this lovely chapeau. Anything you want to tell us about it?
I do.
It's
You know what I want to say? My friend Trisha bought this for me. We worked together at a Humane Society and we had a thrift store at the Humane Society. This was almost 40 years ago. So this hat was already vintage when she bought it for me. So um, but I remember clearly that she saw it and she grabbed it and she bought it for me before anyone else could buy it. And I love it for that reason, right? It's got multi layers. It also, somebody took a lot of time and put sequin kinds of things on it that I'm sure were not
Mhm.
there when it was originally bought in the 30s or 40s. So I like that. I like things with
It's
layers.
it's adorable. I like things with stories. I like things
Yes,
with stories. Clothing, hand-me-downs, dishes, um, pictures. I like the found object or the object that has some meaning and history in it. And
I
when you think
agree.
about the hat, you think about your friend, about that life you were leading 40 years ago, about who had the hat before you, the love and care that they took in adding those jewels. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so rich.
All the
It's so
places I've
rich.
been in it. Yes, I know. All
Right.
of that. I
Yeah.
know.
Well, so what we are here to talk about is something related to real estate. This is real estate therapy, after all. And which, don't ask me exactly what that means. It's not like shopping therapy, like where you go out and buy real estate to make yourself feel better. If you're buying real estate to make yourself feel better, that's probably not a great path to fulfillment. Um, but home, I think when it real estate at its essence is about home,
Yeah.
and it's easy for professional realtors, um, anybody in the real estate industry, and people who are buying or selling or renting or thinking about any of this or scrolling through Zillow, to lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about when we talk about real estate is shelter. It's your haven, your home.
Mm.
It's where we live our lives. And I can't think of anyone better to kick that idea around with than you, the Zen celebrator. Um, and so, you hear all those quotes like, um, "Home is where the heart is. There's no place like home." Laura Ingalls Wilder said, "Home is the nicest word there is." And I have a lot of these quotes up my sleeve, but one that I don't often bring out by Robert Frost is, "Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in."
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Um, so I think that the whole idea of home, where real estate is concerned, has gotten a little twisted, a little tangled up in some other stuff. And um, but when I'm out working with people in the search for a home, whether they're carrying it or not, I try to hold for them the fact that we're looking for a place where their lives are going to unfold.
Wow.
And that's a noble calling, to be able to support people while they're doing that. Um, so
Wow. I have to say wow right now. I'm just going to interrupt you because that is so beautiful and so true and maybe not talked about very much. I'm so glad that's what you're carrying. The place where our lives unfold.
definitely. I mean, it took me a while to kind of settle on that, to begin to grok that. I do know that there was so much joy that came from helping people find a place. Like
Yeah.
the day when I would meet them to give them the keys or call them to let them know that their offer had been accepted. Those were those are such a high that comes from that. That's something to really celebrate and to pay attention to. But what seeped in a little later was uh, sort of from a practical standpoint, when I would be showing people property, I'd be thinking about their wish list and what was going on in their lives. Let's say that they had just accepted a teaching position at uh, San Francisco State University, and they liked being near the ocean. So that would immediately dictate, they wanted to be close to work, they wanted to be close to the ocean. So we might be looking kind of over in the park side or
Right.
around Merced Heights. And when I'm talking about San Francisco, but then it would be things like, I'd be looking at a house and they'd be saying, well, we're thinking about starting a family. And maybe the place we were looking at had a primary bedroom downstairs and the other bedrooms upstairs. Well, that young couple might not be thinking how what that was going to be like from a practical
Right.
standpoint with a
Mm,
child. You don't want to be on a different floor than your child. So there's that practical aspect, but then there's sort of the life trajectory part of it, where I think about, okay, that little baby who's not even conceived yet is going to grow up to be a toddler, and then a little boy or girl, and then they're going to be a teenager. And then one day, so I get to journey with people and I get to
oh,
think about their journey ahead. Um, I mean, you
right.
went through
Because
your own journey with housing, right?
I did. I did. One thing I want to say before I say, if you do want me to say a little more right now, but it's like, I love that because what you're doing is dreaming with people. They're really, we're investing, right? We're investing in our dreams as much as it is a house or, yeah,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, people talk about a dream home. So you talk about your dream home, you ask someone what their dream home is, you might hear something like, what's going to have 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a pool, a view, right? There'll be this list. But
right.
the dream is really very different than that. The dream is more like, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be so happy to look over and see my partner. I'm going to have this feeling of contentment. It's much more ephemeral.
Yes.
It's it's not a checklist of features. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, you did go through a little journey. Do you want to hear about it?
Well, I know that I want to hear a story about San Francisco sticker shock at the end of this. Sticker shock staging, and well, anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I know that you you were very content in the home that you had, which was a rental, and then through no fault of your own, next thing you know, you had to find something different. You had to move. Tell
Right.
us about that, because there you are living your life in your home, and now you're displaced, and people are
Right.
displaced all the time.
And it was the second time it happened to us too. We had lived originally in the Castro in a place that I loved. And this, where we lived next, was, I always called it Bernal Flats. I don't think that's an official name, but it was Bernal, but it was on Mission Street. So to me,
Right,
it's not up on the hill, it's the flats below
right.
Bernal. But I loved the activity. I loved that I could walk to Valencia Street and all the thrift stores and the restaurants. And to me, it felt very central. We were near the 24th Street BART. Um, and we had a 4 bedroom flat that I loved. It was an old building. It had wonderful old wooden everything, which is my style. I really loved it. And yeah,
And it was
um,
home. It was home.
it was definitely, we had my son, he wasn't a baby there. He was actually born in the Castro Street place, but he was 2, right?
Mhm.
So from the time he was 2 until he was in middle school, so it really felt like home.
Hmm.
he literally grew up there. And he had a huge room that was just really bright and fun. And yeah, so um, yeah, so that it was, I wouldn't have chosen to move. I never dreamed of having a house. I was never that kind of person. I love the city life. And now I have to say, I'm grateful now that we were given a lot of money to move. We negotiated with them because we didn't actually have to move, but they could get a lot more money selling the place if they didn't have us burdening them,
Right. And I
right?
think I want to put a, like, I'm going to just jump in there for people who might be watching or listening who aren't familiar with the landscape of tenants and rentals in San Francisco. It's a real hot topic. It's something that is complicated. There are law practices strictly devoted to this. But San Francisco, unlike a lot of parts of the country, um, actually has a lot of law written in about that's aimed at protecting tenants from being evicted. You can't just, hey, you can't just buy a building. In fact, you can't buy a house now with tenants in it and ask them to leave.
Right.
If I mean, if you're moving in, yes, but you have to go through certain procedures and so forth. And so it's very common, and it's absolutely right and fair that tenants should be considered, and because there is a real financial impact on people who are being displaced, there is often money involved, and because nobody wants to deal with that as a new owner. um, the property is much more valuable if it's vacant, hence
Right.
talking your situation where you had an opportunity to negotiate a leaving fee, let's call it, which hopefully was helpful for you and helped
It,
mitigate some of the pain.
I was going to say it was like, so it, even though I never wanted to own a home, the person that I don't really know what to, my son's dad, whom I lived with, although we're no longer a couple, a little bit unconventional, but he rightly so said, this is a big chunk of money. The rent prices had skyrocketed. We were paying $2,000 a month for a 4 bedroom, and we would have, and we knew this too. We knew they could easily probably get 5 or 6 thousand for the place we were in. So we knew it was not going to
Right,
be a burden to them to give us a big chunk of money.
right.
Um, but it really did put us in a place of like, do we want to rent and pay, that much money and just lose it all? So it did, we were sort of like, um, I don't want to say backed into buying a home, but maybe that was it. Maybe it was being backed into it.
Right.
Yeah. My son was
That,
in middle school, and that's a terrible time, as far as I was concerned, to move a child out of the city, which was our other option, was to go someplace where the rents would be a lot more reasonable. But that wasn't even, he was our top priority.
and that's so sweet. I mean, that's what home is
Right.
about, right? I mean, and San Francisco has, I don't know if this was on the books when you went through this, but you cannot evict a family during the school year any.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh, I
that's
love that.
that's that's one of the laws. And some people might say, well, that's just ridiculous, but no, it has a real impact on
It,
families.
it does. It
So
does.
there's a reason for that. Um,
Right. And so, long story short, I was telling you before we actually started recording, I still miss that flat. I loved that flat. The location was much more to my suiting, so much about it. And I'm so grateful. Right. I mean, I'm so grateful that we have now unbelievably lived in this home for, I think, close to 13 years, which I can't even believe it's been that long. Um, Maybe it's been 10. But still, that we've been able to invest money rather than, just
Right.
spending it on rent.
All right. Can you remember, were there any qualities of the flat in Mission in Bernal Flat that you, is there some memory or picture in your mind about the feeling that that place had?
Uh, yeah, it was alive. It was alive both inside because we had a young child,
Mm,
which I could probably start crying right now if I let myself, because that aliveness that happens from, the time they're born all through, to me, that they just, children bring vitality and joy and curiosity and interest. But it was also alive outside. So we had huge windows overlooking Mission Street, and Kane, my son, and I would just sit and, we'd play game, find, do I spy games or whatever. But it's like there was just
mhm.
such a life force everywhere.
Right,
And where we live now, it's still San Francisco, but I always say we had to move to the suburbs. Like,
right.
I'm so sad we had to move to the suburbs.
It's funny because you're really not that far away from where you were before. But I mean, like I talked to one of my colleagues, Lisa, who I'll say, "Oh my gosh, we have to drive all the way across town, to get to our next appointment." And she's like, she grew up in LA. She's like, "Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? It's like a 15-minute drive from here. You're crazy. You could walk. You could walk."
It is funny. It is like literally it's a 20-minute walk from where we are right now to where we used to live. But it's a different landscape. Anyone who knows San Francisco also understands that, right? It's
Right. And there's a lot of little micro climates and little micro neighborhoods, and it's a block. In some places, it's a block by block
right.
proposition. But like what you just described, like, okay, you will never see in a real estate listing. I'm pretty sure you will never see windows with overlooking Mission Street as a desirable feature, right? That's just not going to make it into a
That's so
listing,
funny.
right? Because there's buses on Mission, and I mean, I when my oldest son was a baby, we lived in a flat, a condo. Well, it was a TIC, soon to be a condo, on Divisadero, and
Oh, okay.
Divisadero, um, now it's sort of in the heart of what they call NOPA, very
Yeah.
trendy, desirable neighborhood. At that time, it was a whole different story. And it was pretty, like, soot was a problem on our front stairs from the cars going up and down Deviz. There was actually
Uh-huh.
this fine layer of black dust all over everything, probably not great for our health. But and it was a noisy street. So when you were in the front room, it was really quite noisy. But I think my son's first words were truck, because he
Oh,
would he would stand in the window at the front and he would watch the traffic go by. He loved it. It was fabulous. But when I sold that place, I didn't say great view of the trucks on Diviz, right?
I know. I know. But this also just goes to show you, I mean, you and I, we've been talking about home a lot. Like, home means so many different things to so many people, right? And I just want to preface this because I didn't say this. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I dreamed of the urban life, right? That was home to me was going to be my future. Uh, the cafes and the bustle and the people and the color and so home, that is funny what you're saying about that wouldn't be in a listing, because to me it's that kind of, I want to I want to be in the room where it happens, right? Like,
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, what you will see in the listing is like, or what you used to see was granite countertops and hardwood floors. It was like if you could put in granite countertops and hardwood floors, then you were set. Now things have changed. Um, it's quartz instead of granite. But um, there's I think the point is there's just a real disconnect, I think, a lot of times between what we think home means and what we want when we're looking for a home
Right.
and what home is. Like in your, how do you, oh wise person who practices, how do you come home to yourself in your home? How do you, what
Oh,
makes it feel like, um, what's that Talking Heads? There's that Talking Heads song about home. I'll think of it in a minute.
is this my beautiful wife? Is this my beautiful
No,
house?
well,
That one?
that's a great one.
That's a good one
Yeah.
too.
No,
How did I
home is
get
where I
how did I
want to
get here?
be. Home is where I want to
Oh,
be,
home
but
is
I
where I want
guess
to
I'm
be.
already there.
I love that. And what a great question. And a couple things for me. I really, in my spiritual tradition, there's a phrase, practice like your hair is on fire. I practiced like my hair was on fire when we moved here because I didn't want to be here. We did not, just again, grateful. I never want to talk about this home without saying that because I understand, right? Like, super privileged to be here. And um, I never fit here. So the house itself, it is not, the neighborhood is not really me. So, what I practiced with is exactly what you're talking about, which I think is really important, which is how do we create home, right? Sometimes the building, the neighborhood that we live in isn't really where we see ourselves. And so it is a question. I think it's a beautiful thing. How do we come home to ourselves wherever we are? And how do we create that feeling? For me, um, part of it was expanding my idea of home that I'm literally a 5-minute walk from BART, which is hugely important to me. I
Mhm.
love to be mobile. I love to get around the city. I love going places. And so I sort of expanded my idea of what we were buying, that we weren't buying this house, we were buying access to the rest of the city. For the price we paid, we may have ended up somewhere really far out,
Mhm.
which was a possibility. That's, a lot of places I'd never even heard of. And
Mhm.
so that's one thing. The other thing is um, my the men in my life. I have a couple different men that I'm really close to. Built me a writing studio, and
I
they
love
built
it.
that specifically to be my place to come home to.
Mhm.
And so that's where I am right now. It's very
Oh,
bright. It sets up. It's out in the backyard,
right.
but
So you, I love it.
it has the hardwood floors that I missed from the old place. It has lots of windows. It has orange gold paint. It's alive.
Mhm. Does
So
it
I
have
think
granite countertops, though? That's what
that
I want to know. I'm joking.
I love that.
I'm jealous because I would love to have a little, some people would call it a she shack, but a little writing studio. It's perfect for you.
Well, right. So it was something that actually, we created. And I think that that's a part of it, right? How to create the feeling of home. And that happens all kinds of different ways, right? It happens by having a box in the living room when we first moved here that was full of games, right? Like that
Mhm.
made it feel like at any moment we could pull out a board game together.
Mhm.
I think it's those sorts of things that are like what bring us to life.
Yeah, what you were saying there about the box of games, that I was just thinking about how, there's this history of people immigrating to the U.S. or moving, let's say back in the pioneer days, coming across the country in a covered wagon.
Right.
And often the mother in the family would bring with her a couple of very precious objects. Maybe it was a family Bible, maybe it was a quilt that
Yes.
her mother made, maybe it was some beautiful china, a plate, a single
Yes.
dish that would be carried with reverence to the new place. And I'm actually, this made me think of my mother. Um, I'm from Appalachia, and come from a long line of people who, had little farms to try and get by. And all the women on both sides of the family, going way back, they were very interested in gardening. They raised their own food. They knew all the Latin names of the flowers and the trees. And my mother uh, took like she took a cutting from a lilac bush in my grandmother's yard.
Oh,
She had, and still to this day, has some of the plants that grew on these farms many years ago, long since
wow.
sold. They grow in her little yard today. And that that said home to her. That's how she brought it
Yes.
with her.
I love this. I love what you're saying because as you're talking, it is making me think of more like one of the things that we have now that we did not have in the flat is a yard. And I never thought I wanted a yard, but I actually love eating outdoors.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I always do, my mother hand embroidered a tablecloth many, many, many years ago that I always use when we eat outdoors. And I send her photos because, so that she knows that but I think that speaks to what you're talking about, right? That's the version of, um, items, tangible things that do actually say home to us.
Right.
They
It,
connect us to something, connect us to maybe some other home that we want to be a part of this one.
right. And it's a through line. Hopefully it doesn't turn into hoarding, like where you bring, right? Because I've seen that, right? I've seen plenty of that. Um, but like um, have a house up in Northern California that is very in a fire prone area. And we were close to being evacuated 2 summers ago. And I had to make a list of what I wanted my friend and neighbor to go in and get out of the house.
Wow.
What was important to me? Now, I have plenty of beautiful, simple things that I love, and some of them had been just recently acquired because the house was new to me. And but when it came down to it, I had a list of I think 8 items. They were all either art or a basket that my son had made,
Oh,
a painting that my mother had painted.
yes.
That was all. That was all I wanted. That was all I needed to feel like, I could survive. Um, that
Wow.
and But yeah, I mean, we're talking about something that helps us feel that we are at home. But there are other practices, don't you think, that help us? How do we gather around the hearth today? What is the hearth in your opinion, and how do we get ourselves around the hearth?
Yeah. It's funny that you're asking this because I've been talking to a lot of friends because I have a lot of friends who are middle-aged women and their lives have turned out not to look like what they thought it was going to. Family has changed dramatically, divorce, death. And one of the common things that seems to come up for all of us is we talk about the table. Like I'll say, and you've probably said this to you. like one of the hardest things about the shifting of my own family is, but I always imagined us all sitting around the table together, when just growing old around the table, telling there's
Right.
a, particularly my family, we have, you know, a lot of like just long lingering breakfasts and laughter and talking, and I've heard this from my other friends too, that it's like, well, yeah, my grandchildren, I imagined my grandchildren coming and sitting around the table, or I think that the I guess they did use the hearth in the olden days was to cook, right? So it's probably not that
Mhm.
different, that somehow the kitchen, the table, the meal times are, I mean, it's with my friends as well. And this is to answer your question, one of the things that I've tried to remind myself is that the family, I'm putting that in quotes, family for me is anytime I'm really at a table with somebody with a spaciousness of time and maybe a cup of coffee or a meal, and no phones anywhere to be seen. To me, that's the hearth.
Yeah, that is I'm with you on that. And it's I've always been made anxious by those times, actually, with my children and my marriage, which ended, and then my new partner. One of our maybe unstated but intentional on my part practices was always to eat our meals together, always
Oh,
at the table. None of
yes.
this dashing about, you know, grabbing a piece of toast and putting it in your mouth as you run to the BART. We made a point of, and I'm as I'm saying this, I'm expressing my gratitude for that we made that a practice,
Yes.
even if it wasn't stated. Um, but to be at the table and to not have it be fight time.
Right.
That used to happen growing up. That would be the time when my dad would bring something up like to my little brother, and then a fight would ensue over, you know, like my dad was a high school football coach, and so there was a period where when my brother was had just gotten to high school, there would be some tension about my brother's wish to play a certain position on the
Oh,
football team and my dad's ideas about what should take place. So often it would be dinner time when that would come out, and
yeah. So
my
that's a
mom and
good.
I would be just like,
But I love your question, and I hope anyone that's listening to this will pause for a moment, really think about that, because I think it's such an important. First of all, your question of how do we find that home wherever we are is such a great question, and then also what is the hearth, for us. These are such beautiful questions because you and I tend to talk about intention a lot, right? I think it's one of the places we connect, and it's like setting those intentions is really important.
yeah,
Because, like what you were saying, how grateful you are for those times around the table. I feel the same way, both at my mom's house on all our visits, we always eat together, but also when my son was growing up. And those times are irreplaceable, you
right.
know,
They're gone. I mean,
they're gone.
they're ephemeral, and so is our life, right? So is our
So is our
life. I
life.
mean, you and I had a conversation yesterday about. We were talking about celebration and joy, and how with no mud, no lotus. The other side of that is there's plenty of sorrow and sadness to go around. There's despair, there's inequality, there's oppression, there's mental health issues. There's so many things going on that we can't celebrate. There's illness. And often when we're thinking about home or the search for a home, we're thinking, wow, I love this living room. I could have a great party here. And that's so wonderful that we're thinking about. um, One of the things you'll see in real estate description often is perfect for entertaining. Okay.
Right.
We're thinking perfect for entertaining. But what we're not thinking is perfect for if I'm undergoing chemotherapy,
Wow.
right? You know,
Wow.
where do you want to be in
Wow.
sickness and in health? Where do you want to
Wow.
be? How do you want it to feel? Um, that's
That's
something that I hold
that is
for
so
my clients.
powerful. It's so powerful. And I thought where you were going to go because I think this is a side aspect of this, which is we don't have a home that is at all perfect for entertaining. Our house is so small, we barely have room for a table. And and that doesn't stop me from having all of my, the I love the fun linens, and I love the candles, and I love to make things special, and I love to bring out the, surprise love list for people at the dinner table. Like, I think that there's also, this is a piece of it, right? That it's like, um we don't always have those outer fixings that we think will make a home, and that's where
Right.
we bring. And I think what you're saying is similar. Sometimes we have the outer fixings, and the life that we're living is not matching that. And again, how do we feel at home
Right.
in all of these places that are hard and disappointing, are really important questions. Yeah.
And if you were answering that question, um, I think the answer is that we need first to look for home within ourselves. I mean, home in dreams and Jungian analysis, home is really the metaphor for our very selves. If you're dreaming about a house, you're dreaming
Yeah.
about your actual body, probably. Um, and I think some people don't want to hear this, but I think that takes some kind of a spiritual practice. It takes some kind of reflection or turning inward to find home within ourselves. Do you think that's the
I
case?
do. And I agree. I know people don't like to hear it. People, the words meditation or yoga or grounding, those all could have kind of this like woo sensibility about them. But the truth of it is that everything externally, and we've sort of been hinting at this, we all know this, everything externally is not guaranteed.
Right.
Right? Really, that's what we have, is that hearth inside of ourselves, as cheesy as that sounds. That's really the only place that we know we could go to for our entire lives.
Right.
And so I do agree. And it's, I feel compelled to say this because I wanted to when you were talking about the hats, right? The reason I wear hats is because I was suicidal for a long time. And when I decided that I was going to stay on this planet, I also made a choice that I was going to celebrate. And so if my house doesn't feel like me, if the family doesn't look like I want it to anymore, if things are changing in ways I don't like, I'm still dedicated to, what can I celebrate? The
Right.
hat is my way of reminding myself, right? Like, maybe it's a part of my heart. Like, you know, you have that capacity.
That is so beautiful. I mean, what a great, I mean, and what you said about the hearth inside ourselves. There's a poem by, I think it's David White, you know, or there's a few poems, but there's one about sort of coming home to ourself, coming home to yourself, to the one who has always loved you,
Yes.
coming home to that, the one who's always loved you. And you're talking about the hearth inside yourself, and I feel a little teary, so I'm going to try and just soldier on through this. But that something about pouring yourself a glass and celebrate, acknowledging yourself, the friend within. There's something, that's where it all starts. That's
It
where it all starts.
is. It is. And, I'm glad that we sort of came around to this because it does speak to, for most people, I imagine most people, I know there are some lucky people who have their dream home and they're going to retire in that home with their family and, that Norman Rockwell sort of thing. But for most people, that's not the case. For most people, we're going to live in different homes, and some of them we're going to like, and some we aren't. And sometimes we're going to be lonely, and sometimes we're going to be with people we love. And it's like, right. Like, so what we've come to is it's like, if we're carrying that with us wherever we go, that's like our starting place.
Yeah. Like it's like carrying the flame, like carrying
Yeah,
the little thing that you can make the fire with. You have it.
exactly.
You can you can have that hearth. Well, wow. I just love everything that you said and the directions that we went in. I wasn't expecting this exactly.
Me either.
So, hey, that's great. Um, so let's have a quick. I hope you'll tell a little real estate story if you can think of one. Um, Something where I try to end each episode with a story that you might not hear otherwise about something to do with real estate, maybe to do with your home search, or can you think of something?
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. And, I've said this a number of times, and, it always starts with the gratitude. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to have a home. So grateful to live in San Francisco. I'm so grateful my son got to grow up here. And it's a Barbie doll house, right? We just like, it is a Barbie doll house. And one of the funniest things about it is that it's like, obviously we knew it was a small house when we were looking at it. It was the location that we could, so easily get to other parts of the city through BART and the Mission Street and everything. But a funny thing about this house that we didn't know until after we moved in, because we just didn't register, was when we were looking at the house, they had it staged, as they do, but they had it staged. The beds it's a 3 bedroom, believe it or not, in this tiny little house, but the beds were like less than twin size. I don't know what they were like, I don't even know what smaller than twin would be, but they were cardboard, right? We didn't know that, but the beds were smaller than twin. There was no refrigerator in the kitchen. They had like a tiny, like what you might see in a bar, like a tiny little bar table with 2 chairs beside it in the kitchen to make it.
Mhm.
So it's like, there was a little tiny coffee pot that had some stuff that looked like coffee in it. Like everything was like they must have got to like the Barbie store to stage this house. So
I
that
love it.
it didn't look quite as small as it really is.
It was like a Barbie house, like insert tab B into tab A, was
Yes,
the thing that came up for me.
yes.
Because I know apparently my father almost had a nervous breakdown one Christmas Eve, after going to a party and having a couple drinks in him, and then having to put the Barbie house together
Oh,
for Santa, um, and just lost his mind. So that next morning, my parents said, Santa has another gift for you, but he's dropping it off later today.
oh my God.
It
Oh,
was the
that's so
Barbie
funny.
house, but just staging is everything. Context.
Obviously.
It's context, and I don't know. I've gone into places where um, there's kind of cheap staging, and there'll be or clever, cheap, whatever, but the bed's not even a bed. I mean, with my assistant, we set up. I forget what it was. Like we had some kind of a mattress platform, but we put it on yoga blocks, right? It was sitting on yoga blocks, and then we put a bedspread over it. Like you can't. It's it's theater.
It is
But
theater.
how funny that then you closed and you found out, oops, wait a minute, we can't actually fit a queen or a full bed in here.
I mean,
That's
we kind of, it's like it wasn't like we were totally tricked. We knew the square footage, for goodness sake, but still, right? It's that illusion. It's the sleight of hand, right? To it
right,
all. That is really
right,
funny.
right.
Yeah, I know.
I love it. The magic of staging, the magic of the theater of the dream, right?
Exactly. I want to appreciate you, Cynthia, because I love what you're bringing to all of this. I mean, obviously, you're someone who you are insightful, reflective, thoughtful person. And so it's like, but bringing all of this, again, I think these are things that we could be talking about more. And how will it change our lives, right? If we were thinking more about home and what we want to bring to our home or create.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
rich. And I'm so grateful for you. I love what we've talked about. And let's do it again.
Okay.
We have a couple of ideas. And can you let our listeners and viewers know how to find you?
Of course. I am almost on any social media. It's simply celebrate. And
Simply
my
celebrate. Okay.
simply celebrate. My book is called Say It Now, and that can be found wherever, books are sold. And so, yeah, thank you. Thanks.
And I'm saying it now. I'm a big fan. I just love you to pieces. And thank you so much, Sherry.
Right back
Thank
at you.
you.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you, Cynthia. Mwah.
Bye.